Thank you, colleagues, and welcome to Birmingham City Council Audit Committee. I'm the chair of the committee, Councillor Fred Grimrod, and I will take everyone through the agenda. But can I first note to members and to officers that present so please introduce yourselves as you speak for the web streaming purposes. So basically the camera facility is not able to zoom in on us. So those of you, if watching online, will see me in the distance somewhere. Hopefully you'll be able to hear me. So thank you for that. So the first thing I need to know, agenda item 1, is the notice of recording webcast. And I'm to advise the meeting that this meeting will be webcast for live or subsequent broadcast via the Council's meeting YouTube site. And that members of the press public may record and take photographs except where there are confidential or exempt items. So item number 2, there are apologies that have been given by Councillor Shah and Councillor Hussain. Are there any other apologies?
Councillor Lyons.
Apologies for Councillor Lyons as well.
And I have to leave at 3 o'clock for the coordinating.
No problem. I think
standing declaration.
Thank you, Councillor Tilsley. I think that attendance of the meeting is noted for a part of the meeting is included as all of the meeting.
Yes, it is.
So essentially, we don't need to do that. I appreciate
it. Do you need to stay slightly longer than 2 minutes? Yeah.
Is it 2 minutes?
Well,
stretch it through your
stretch it to about 35 minutes. Yeah.
Normally it is recorded that Councillor X left at.
Right. Okay.
So then item 3, declarations of interests. Members are reminded that they must declare all relevant pecuniary and other registrable interests arising from any business to be discussed at this meeting. If a disposable pecuniary interest is declared, a member must not participate in any discussion or vote on the matter and must not remain in the room unless they have been granted a dispensation. If other registrable interests are declared, a member may speak on the matter only if members of the public are allowed to speak at the meeting, but otherwise must not take part in any discussion or vote on the matter and must not remain in the room unless they have been granted a dispensation. If it is a sensitive interest, members do not have to disclose the nature of the interest, just that they have an interest. And information on the Local Government Association's Model Councillor Code of Conduct is set out, and I think looking at the committee agenda, you can find a link to that. And the appendix 1 of that gives an interest flow chart to provide a simple guide to declaring interest at meetings. So I would encourage colleagues to look at that, and any members of the public or press watching us to also be aware that that is the standard with which we hold ourselves to. Item number 4, exempt information, possible exclusion of the press and public, and therefore we need to consider whether any matter on the agenda contains exempt information within the meaning of section 100L of the Local Government Act 1972, and where it is considered that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information for the reasons outlined in a given report. I have been made aware that there is no item that would need to go into private session on the current agenda. However, members do have the option to request, should anything emerge from those agenda items, that we do move into private session. And if that does happen, then we will need to formally pass the following resolution: that it be resolved that in accordance with Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, as amended by the Local Government Act Access to Information Variation Order 2006, the public be excluded from the meeting during consideration of those parts of the agenda designated as exempt on the grounds that it is likely, in view of the nature of the business to be transacted or the nature of the proceedings, if members of the press and public were present, there would be a disclosure to them of exempt information. Therefore, I ask colleagues that we pass that motion just in case we do need to request moving into private session. Can I get that? Thank you, colleagues. And agreed? Thank you, colleagues. Therefore, I move then to item number 5, the minutes of our Audit Committee meeting on the 22nd of November 2022. We are working through these minutes, and I think it's the most recent 7 minutes that we have. There was a bit of a backlog, and I'm very grateful to officers working with me to get that resolved. So to confirm and sign the minutes of the last meeting of the committee held the 22nd of November 2022. Agreed? Any issues? No problem. Thank you. Then I have a change to the given agenda that we will need to move items 6 and 7 around in order to facilitate Councillor Khan's attendance, which we're very grateful for. So we'll be taking Councillor Khan's assurance session on her health and social care portfolio first, and then we will move to take the remainder of Councillor Cotton's portfolio that we discussed at the last meeting after that. So, and I'm aware that you do need to leave shortly, Councillor Khan. I'm very grateful that you've come to join us today. I would hand over to you to give your assurance session. I know you've not done one of these before, but basically it's over to you to tell us about your portfolio. We've been given as members a briefing from the internal audit, Assistant Director of Audit and Risk Management, on the areas related to your portfolio, and as well as that. So basically we're looking for you to give us a bit of a presentation, and then members are able to ask any questions related to your portfolio that they so wish to do so. So over to you, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. And first of all, I'd like to just thank committee for being okay with me having rejigging your agenda just to suit me being able to leave on time. So thank you for that. I have got a presentation, just a few slides to help me present the assurance session. On the first slide, there is a slight error with my title. I'm a Cabinet Member Health and Social Care, not Social Care and Health, but that's just a small detail. But yeah. But yeah, so so in this presentation, I intend on giving an update to the Audit Committee to go through a number of different areas which are outlined in this slide. So I'll start off by talking through the areas of responsibility within my portfolio and follow on by identifying the key areas of risk and issues faced by adult social care. So that's just a bit of an overview of some of the things that I'm going to be picking up in the presentation. And the next slide should just outline my portfolio and just the areas that I've got responsibility for. So the two main service areas within my responsibility are adult social care and public health, which operate out of two separate directorates. And I've also got elements of wellbeing and sport, which support my responsibilities around championing healthy communities and supporting citizens to make positive changes to their lives. And next, so now talking about the risks associated with adult social care. Risk management is taken really seriously. Services within my adult social care portfolio are taking action to respond to three strategic risks facing the council. The first risk, which I'll just talk on, is risk number, so it's SR 5.4, which is the inability to fully meet social care requirements, including safeguarding. And in relation to this, so the risks arising around backlog and reviews and support plans. The risks arising to delivery of statutory functions include a backlog of routine annual reviews to support plans and the allocation of a worker to those people referred to adult social care for a conversation. And to mitigate this risk, plans are in place to monitor and close cases where a person's circumstances have changed, and to assign community teams for follow-up and action. In terms of an update, there's been a steady improvement in performance around reviews since July 2022, and the current performance level as of December is 68.8%. It's still not good enough. We're still working towards improving that, but we're on a journey of steady improvement, and I'm hoping in the next few months we'll be able to see that performance level continue to increase. The service continues to work with teams, in particular targeting teams where further improvement is required to reach targets, and then to support performance improvements. Performance clinics have commenced where team managers and senior practitioners have been running these for approximately 6 to 8 weeks. In relation to safeguarding, which is another element of this risk, relates to the capacity of the safeguarding team to respond to concerns. And so the introduction of the original customer journey and the issues with staff recruitment and retention resulted in a growing number of cases that were not being progressed in a timely manner. An update in relation to this element of the risk is around the adult safeguarding triage service, which went live at the beginning of August 2022. This is addressing the issues around the contact centre's limited remit for screening safeguarding referrals, which has been present since the customer journey was introduced. And dealing with the backlog in safeguarding referrals is a priority. And a project backlog team is working through all the historical lower risk referrals. The most recent figure that I've got as at 22nd of November, there are 428 unallocated concerns in safeguarding, specifically just in relation to low risk referrals, which is down from the starting point of 2,300 cases that we had as that backlog in June 2022. So if you just sort of have that, look at the comparison of June 2022 till November 2022, the reduction has gone from 2,300 to 428. And I'm told that that's continuing to reduce since then, because by the time that I've been able to come to the committee, this number is obviously slightly still out of date, but the backlog has continued to be worked on through the safeguarding triage service. And then that should bring me to the next risk that's on the strategic risk register, which is the view of the council by the regulator. So for adult social care, the regulated services, as you can see on the screen, the only service area that isn't currently registering or rated as operating on good is the Kenrick Care Centre. And to mitigate risks, a revised improvement plan has been developed to address areas of concern, particularly at Kenrick, which is the only service area, as I said, that's not achieving at least a good rating. Quality monitoring visits are in place, and the team manager role within care centres have been refocused to ensure that quality and standardisation is in place across the regulated services. And the third one, which is 7.2, which is the rising pressure of demand. The actions to mitigate in relation to adult social care, one of which is the rollout of 3 conversations model of social care and the new customer journey. In 2019, the Directorate rolled out the 3 conversations model of social care, which is supported by investment in neighbourhood networks as part of the Directorate approach to prevention and early intervention. This approach has enabled adult social care to deliver significant savings whilst responding to increasing needs and demands. In terms of an update, practice reviews have been undertaken over the course of the year, and the main themes of learning from the 75 cases which have been audited have been built into the practice forum session. Part of the sessions revisit the 3 conversations process and strength-based practice. The sessions are mandatory for all frontline adult social care staff and managers, and there'll be a future practice forums as case file auditing is now part of the supervision process. Apologies, my pages are all mixed up. Still on this slide. So implementation of early intervention model with system partners. So the update on this is the early intervention community team went live in March 2020 with a rollout of occurring during the COVID pandemic. We continue to work with partners. To jointly operate and develop the service in a business as usual manner. So it's therefore proposed at this point is marked as completed and closed. Adult social care has also been working with finance colleagues to see if there are tools available to help better predict future demands for care. So those 3 areas are the strategic. Those 3 risks are on the strategic risk register, and these are the parts where adult social care can help mitigate them 3 particular risks. In terms of the external auditor's report and improvement recommendations, nothing has been raised in the 2020 to 2021 audit findings report in relation to adult social care. So I'm not planning on focusing on this area. And then equally, there were no adult social care issues included on the annual governance statement, which is a positive news. So as referenced in the previous slides, because there were no adult social care issues included on the annual governance statement, I thought it might be helpful to then make reference to some of the key areas of risks within the Directorate assurance statement. And these are all of the sort of the main areas that we're currently working on and have sort of highlighted as part of the Directorate assurance. But I'm not going to go through every single one of them and give an individual update, but I thought I'd pick out 2 examples from the list, one of which is somewhere there, which is on the day opportunities. So all Birmingham City Council internal day centres had reopened post-COVID on the 28th of February last year, and services are following government guidance, creating smaller bubbles of citizens and staff and implementing regular testing. Citizens who returned to internal day centres received a hybrid service model of both building-based as well as outreach day opportunity services. There's been a loss of income as we have not charged citizens for day centres over this period, and all external day centres are operating at pre-pandemic levels, but some citizens have still chosen not to return to them. In December 2021, approval was given to commission an independent co-production partner to carry out a review of day opportunities post-pandemic, and that piece of work is currently ongoing. The co-production partner is Red Quadrant, and a report of the review will be presented to the Cabinet in April 2023. And then the second one I thought I'd just give an update on is in relation to transition and preparation for adulthood. In response to escalating costs of care packages, a backlog of statutory assessments and poor recruitment and retention issues, and a service redesign for PFA and transitions was developed. Extensive consultation for the service redesign was completed in May 2022, after which recruitment commenced for the 24 staff posts. And the new teams are formally aligned in September, and since then have reviewed over 500 young people to ensure those in greatest need are allocated a social worker. The new service is due to officially launch, but it was due to officially launch yesterday, and I think it did because I'd asked that by the time I attend just to check whether that did take place. And as far as I'm aware, that was launched yesterday. So I'm mindful that obviously there's other areas. Sorry, I'm mindful that there's obviously other areas that I'm not going to go into like sort of detail on all of them. But if there's anything that kind of stands out to members to want further information on, either in this meeting, I've got some of the, I believe, most up-to-date recent information, and if I'm not able to answer those questions, then Graham will hopefully be able to chip in and answer them. But equally, if there's things that Audit Committee are interested in outside of this assurance session, but would just like to have further information on, because it's obviously an area that adult social care are keeping an eye over, and from an audit perspective, if you're interested to find out a little bit more about, then more than happy for you to kind of make a note of them, and then we can circulate that information afterwards. And then the next sort of bit, although it's not necessarily on any kind of risk register or any risk sort of assurance statement, I thought it might be useful to bring to the attention of members other areas of potential interest in relation to adult social care that we are clearly facing. And in fact, across the council, I'm sure if there's other elected members who come along to Audit Committee, they will say that they're in a similar sort of position. But specifically in relation to these kind of key areas that we are keeping a very close eye on and completely very aware of the difficulties that we've got going on at the moment, I thought I'd give a bit of an update on them. So in relation to the difficulties in recruitment, I know Audit Committee members will be aware that this has been an ongoing sort of issue, not actually just in relation to adult social care. There's issues around recruitment and retention in so many different areas of the workforce. But I thought I'd update members and let them know that the Adult Social Care Directorate has starting salaries for social work staff that are well below the current market position, which has been affecting the recruitment and retention and impacting on services provided to our most vulnerable citizens. A business case was produced which recommended monetary incentives be implemented in the form of a golden hello payment and a recruitment and retention payment to staff in qualified social work and occupational therapy roles. This was presented to the Employment Governance Steering Board, chaired by Rebecca Hellard, which supports the HR and legal services, who considered this carefully, including the legal and business risks. All options were considered and approval was provided to pay additional allowances with effect from the 1st of June 2022. HR and Adult Social Care engaged a recruitment specialist to support the process of recruiting staff to adult social care, including through social media, video chats with staff and targeted advertisement of roles, with a simplified application process which began in June 2022. And then by the end of August 2022, over 200 individuals had applied to join adult social care, and more than 100 of those had progressed to the next steps of recruitment. And as of December 2022, 63 staff have been hired subject to the necessary checks. So that recruitment campaign has been quite successful over that summer period. Obviously, there are still gaps in recruitment. There's still issues around vacancies, but that's just an ongoing exercise, and that campaign will continue to run, where we recognise that actually a lot of the other pressures and the other areas that I'll be touching on are clearly linked with issues around workforce and staffing. So the next sort of issue that I thought I'd talk through is around the cost of living crisis and the financial stability of care homes and care providers, such as things like their fuel bills and overall the cost of living. People needing or working in care are already significantly affected by the impacts of austerity and the pandemic and have now been further hit by the cost of living crisis. Spiralling costs of inflation is impacting social care through multiple routes. So one of the routes is through citizens. For them, it's maintaining a warm home and a balanced diet. Citizens who are afraid to heat their home risk deterioration in their health, which ultimately adds further pressures on adult social care. Anxieties about inflation and the rising cost of living has also had a serious impact on people's mental health and then citizens' ability to cope on a day-to-day basis. In relation to the social care workforce, over a third of the workforce are on a 0-hour contracts, and inflation further affects their well-being, morale and retention. Cost of fuel also makes community-based jobs less attractive due to the increasing costs to employees, and it puts further pressure on the ability of care services to meet the exceptionally high demands being experienced across the system. And then in relation to the public service and the care market providers, the cost of providing services is rising, and wage offers in competing occupations are already more attractive than care work. There's a serious risk that care providers will not have scope to fully absorb the higher costs themselves, and then this heightens service continuity concerns. And then the next block that I have of doom and gloom is obviously the winter pressures that we're currently facing. The reason why I separated the cost of living crisis with the winter pressures was just to focus a little bit on the role of the Adult Social Care Directorate in relation to health and supporting the NHS. So Adult Social Care is taking a number of steps to address this risk. One of the ways that we're trying to do this is the strategic approach with partners. The strategic lead for the council working with leads from partner organisations such as the NHS to facilitate a coordinated system response, supporting people through this incredibly difficult time. There is a Help in Brum campaign, and the Directorate is taking an active role in delivering the Help in Brum campaign, including leading on the benefits work stream. In relation to supporting citizens, we're working with partners to share information on sources of support around the cost of living crisis, and the Directorate is encouraging all staff to check in with people during their routine contacts and support citizens to access assistance, for example, maximising benefits and offering tips for conserving energy and keeping warm. In relation to use of grants, we're using the Household Support Grant to support citizens experiencing hardship and directing our community resources to assist those who are most in need. In relation to hospital discharges, discharge services have increased support around the cost of living as part of their discharge processes, which includes warm packs, which include practical items such as low-cost heaters and warm clothing. The support with one-off costs were required as well. Steps have been taken to improve the access to support citizens who are homeless. And in relation to market sustainability, Adult Social Care recognises the impact of rising costs on the providers of our essential care services, and Adult Social Care continues to work with health providers and partners to work with other providers to ensure services can continue to function against the backdrop of the rising costs and increasing pay pressures from the workforce. There is unprecedented demand on the NHS, which is placing pressure on the Adult Social Care discharge teams. We ran a presentation for elected members. I want to say it was last week, but it was last week. I was going to say, but I don't even remember what day it is right now. But yeah, so we ran a presentation for elected members last week around this matter. And I think that the presentation, which I did circulate the slides afterwards, so if members weren't able to attend that, it did give a clear picture as to the role that Adult Social Care is providing and supporting the NHS, specifically in relation to hospital discharges around the winter pressures. This first 6 months of 2021 to 2022 saw spikes in demand for some discharge services of up to 50%, and staff are working very well to maximise the discharges and keep up with the demand. This has meant that there are not delays in discharging people from hospital related to lack of social care, And I know that in other local systems, in other local authorities, some not that far from us, and some probably a bit more further afield, this is a real issue. I'm pleased to be able to say that the way that the Social Care Director has been supporting the NHS has really sort of managed the process in the best way that we possibly can, given all of the other pressures that we've got within our workforce. And then partners are putting in place business continuity plans as we expect staff to also succumb to winter illnesses, because obviously it's not just regular sort of citizen patients, but it's also staff who have been affected by having the winter period and the illnesses. And then while social care have been offered additional grants to support discharges, just as a final sort of point, these are one-off short-term support that does actually limit capacity for sustainable long-term solutions. So I know that we have received some payments from government, but as I said, it's not there isn't that sort of forward-thinking view. So in terms of overall other sort of potential areas of interest for Audit Committee in relation to adult social care and the sort of worries and the issues that the concerns that we've currently got, that kind of in a snapshot, possibly might be the last slide, I think, was just to give a bit of an overview of, one, the elements of the strategic risk register and how adult social care take part in or are involved in mitigating some of those risks in the respective areas that are directly relevant to adult social care. And then, as I said, there were some that are on the Directorate Assurance Statement, which we can send further information for. And then the last bit was just other issues that aren't necessarily sort of risks on any register, but just areas of concern that we've got an eye on. And I have no idea what time it is now. I feel like I've been talking through.
We've been very grateful for that report, Catherine. I'm aware that you need to head off, so I'm very happy for the director to take the question.
I was just going to say I'm really conscious.
But I'm very grateful to you for taking us through a report that's related to this committee's business in a very distinct and very sequential way that helps us to understand. Often we get a whole lot of other stuff, and it was very focused, and it helps us to understand our remit with regard to your portfolio. So I'm very grateful for that. I do need to disappoint, or is there a few minutes? In which case, I will thank you and welcome you again in 6 months or so time, where we can perhaps have a bit of a longer discussion and ask you some of the questions about it. Otherwise, we'll address the questions to the director.
Thank you so much, and apologies that I have to leave, but hopefully Graham will be able to answer any of the other questions, and I'm happy to come back at a future meeting if you'd like me back.
That would be very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Councillor Tilsley, you look like you've got a question ready to go for the director.
Yeah, well,
so I'll hand it to you.
it's a nice, easy underarm to start off. Kenrick Centre. I noted it required improvement. It's good on 2 of the points, requires improvement on 3, as it is under our control, not PCH. So what steps are we taking to address the issues that CQC have raised?
The way we approach this, we've got an action plan. We very carefully go through it with all the management and staff. We're very well aware that the position requires improvement. Is not where we want them to be. We want them to get back to good, which is where they were before. And we're really monitoring that situation very closely to make sure that they achieve that. There's also issues about making sure they're properly supported to do that, to achieve it. It's, in my experience, homes, given the nature of their institutions, often do that kind of thing. They go really well, then they dip down, bring them back up, and then recover and keep going again for a while. So it's not unusual. It's not something that, we're obviously disappointed, but we know it's part of the nature of the business. And it's a matter now of getting a grip, making sure that everybody addresses the action plan, takes responsibility as it's involved. And that's what we've seen in other homes, Perry, for example.
But we need to be on the ball.
Absolutely.
By and large, it has, from my knowledge, a good reputation, and we want to retain it.
It was disappointing, actually.
Yeah, I can believe it, yes. Councillor Chair.
Councillor Tilsley, questions?
I will have to say, no criticism of Councillor Carter did what she was asked. Are we sure this is what Audit Committee is about? Having presentations from cabinet members about their portfolio.
Well, we have been reviewed by 2 external organisations who have confirmed that that is what it is a smart part of our activity. So.
I just wonder whether it's worth explaining it a bit more. And Sarah, you can do this much better than me. The idea is not just a presentation, but a presentation around giving the committee assurance that they're on it with their risk management, they're on it with their governance arrangements, you know, everything tailored. And Chair, as you said, this was very much tailored to the audit committee and the audit committee terms of reference, which made it helpful. Sarah, do add, because
this is 2.5, 3 years ago, and starting with the activity, what are the principles we want to cover? We want to cover assurance statements, we want to cover external audit recommendations, and make sure that they're kept live all through the year for you. And then we had a discussion about who is accountable, and it was thought that the cabinet members jointly with the chief officer should be answerable to the committee. So
one of the challenges you often have, Councillor Jenkins, is the sheer amount of paperwork this committee gets. In one sense, this enables you to focus on a specific area of concern around risk or assurance on the portfolio and bring those questions. So it doesn't necessarily, your question doesn't necessarily have to link to the presentation. The presentation is merely a guide and a steer. If you had a specific issue, as indeed Councillor Tilsley has had, that wanted to raise with the director and the cabinet member around giving you assurance that the council is meeting that assurance, that risk management, that kind of sense of the challenges from the external auditor in this portfolio area, we can raise that. So one of the questions, I have 2 questions that I wanted to give that will probably be linked to some of those aspects that the external auditor has raised.
I just wanted the opportunity to say I see some good factors on risk management around the organisation, but adult social care take it to another level. As you've probably seen from the detail you got in the presentation, the actions they put around mitigation service are sometimes huge, but they're always very specific. They give me monthly updates and very, very well targeted and structured risks.
So I don't know, Councillor Jenkins, with that, whether you have any specific questions with regard to this?
No, I've nothing to add. I mean, I can see everybody else is sold on the idea. I'm sorry, I'm not. But if everybody else thinks it's the right way to run an audit committee, then so be it.
Could I make one comment? Which I hope is helpful to Councillor Jenkins. You'll probably be advised that under the partnership, every cabinet member made a report to council and was held to account by the council. Sir Albert, when he took control, abolished that as a form of governance. And I know the chairman spoke to me before he started to implement it and said, "What do you think?" And I agree, because I think cabinet members do need to be held account. It's not the same as the city council, and I know we do it resources as well from a slightly different angle. But it is a challenge to the cabinet member, and I think that is important.
Can I bring the external auditor in, who I know is on the line and indicated they wish to speak?
Thank you, Chair. Can everyone hear me okay? John Roberts from Grant Thornton. Yeah. So I looked at this part of the agenda, and I think it's very good and very important to do it that way for somewhere like Birmingham. I think the size of the council and the complexity of the council, if you didn't have such an arrangement, you wouldn't be sort of getting under the skin of what are the governance challenges and what's the assurance agenda. So I do support this principle, but like all things, I think it's one to keep under review and check as a committee that you are getting the right level of for you to be skeptical, to get the right level of assurance. You want to feel that you are getting a good analysis and a sort of an honest report back of what are the real challenges and how the council is getting on top of them, because it's a difficult world. It's your agenda is demanding, so you would expect those challenges to be there, and that way you can get more out of the debate than if it was just a sort of a very high level. These are all the things we're doing, So I would urge the sort of the continued skeptical approach to it, but I do very much value what you do.
So in which case, I've got a question for the director. So we are increasingly having, and we indeed have later on in this agenda, issues around concerns of the local government social care ombudsman around things that incidents that have happened within the wider Birmingham City Council remit, none of which are within your portfolio area. The issue that I'd like to find out more about you is this issue of joint working with other areas of the City Council, how the Adult and Social Care Directorate manage that, given that your interactions with a resident of Birmingham City Council may be multidimensional in terms of how the council does that, and how you ensure that joint working, that as the officer has as Sarah has kind of flagged, you guys are managing risk well, but yet when you hand over to another department, maybe that consistency of services isn't there. How do you work to bring the rest of those partners with you to get to the standard that you've now managed to create within your department?
An interesting question. I'd love to think it was always the case that we're in that position. Probably got more humility than that. I think there's plenty we can learn from other parts of the council. Nonetheless, I think what we've tried to do as a directorate is build a culture which is very much focused on the citizen, puts the citizen first, responding to their needs quickly, at pace, and recognising that we need to put effort to resolve issues. And in doing that may mean, for example, you're absolutely right, a person in difficulty often doesn't have one issue, and rather several, some of which relate to housing, or there may be children safeguarding or whatever. So what we do try to do, as I say, is first of all put citizen first, their needs first, and work back from that. So in other words, how do we achieve the citizen and the family achieve a better outcome? Well, this is what we need to do and what we need to put in place to achieve that. And if we did, for example, as we've done recently, identify that the citizens' real issue is their housing, we didn't just, I didn't just drop a note if nothing to do with me, go next door to Paul Langfield. We then feel this is what we can do as well. So we engage in supporting that person while the fundamental problems be resolved. Well, it's the culture, really.
So, and I appreciate that. I guess my issue is, once we achieve high standards within our own directorate, how do we ensure that our engagement with the rest of the City Council, to a resident in the city, they're being dealt with by Birmingham City Council, not by the Adult and Social Care Department. And if they get a great service from you, but a very poor service from housing, for example, I was taught that my first job I was leaving school was working for the new company called TK Maxx that had just emerged. It come over to the UK from the US, and one of the lessons they taught me was that 9 positives equals 1 negative. And so all that great work that you may have instilled in your culture, within your directorate, could be undermined by an engagement with a lack of service. What's the process that you take when you discover a challenge in another department directorate that is not meeting to those same standards you have instilled in that culture?
So in those cases, we deal directly with the appropriate officer, and if we're not getting the response there, we'll escalate it. So again, if it was a housing case, we would try and get that dealt with as locally as possible by the neighbourhood that deals with that. If we feel we're getting traction, we would then escalate it to make sure that appropriate action is taken. So, for example, stair lift and shuttle scheme isn't being addressed. We try to help, we do it plan, we make the right contacts. If that isn't being repaired, we then escalated it to make sure that it's picked up and taken seriously and dealt with in an appropriate way. I think underpinning everything that you're asking me about, and that I feel our culture is built upon, is responsibility. We take responsibility not just for what we directly deliver, but for the council as a whole. And I think that's key.
And then in my final question on that thing, I do have a second question, slightly different, so we may just. Are you confident in that system that we have in terms of working together? So one of this committee's concerns has been the issue of silo working. Are you confident that that system, are we now starting to tackle that challenge? So the way you're delivering an excellent service, there is a challenge for another department to match up to that service, but there is a route and a process that enables that department to work with you and work the rest of the council to move onwards to ensure that that excellent service our residents get.
So, I think it's improving all the time. And I've now been here for probably more than any of the other corporate directors. And I think there is less silo working now than there was when I first arrived. I think people recognise that the council, to be effective, we have to work together jointly. We all have to take responsibility. And a failure in one part of the organisation is a failure of the council. And that's the culture we're trying to ensure everybody is responsible. So that's the kind of positive approach we take. And we're not shy about letting people know when we feel that isn't being achieved.
I'm grateful for that answer. That's very helpful. Moving on, because I'm aware that we're coming to the end of this item. Safeguarding is clearly a strong commitment from your director and an important aspect, a fundamentally essential aspect of your work. This committee has, not within regard to your remit, has challenged other directors and cabinet members on the issue of safeguarding. How confident are you that every employee that works underneath you is fully aware of what safeguarding means, they're delivering on their responsibilities around safeguarding, and they know how to deal with an issue where they have worries and concerns about safeguarding?
Within the adults director, I'm completely confident because it's all part of what we do, how we work, and so on and so forth. So it's always there, and people are always reminded of it. Across the council, we've now improved again, I think, the way we approach that as a council. So I think safeguarding is much higher up the agenda for everybody in the workforce across the council. But it's a big workforce. It's like painting the Ford Bridge. People come in, people move on. We need to make sure that we are doing the appropriate levels of training. But it needs to be appropriate. There's no point everybody being trained to the level my teams are. It's not necessary.
It's that exemplifying of culture that helps us to raise this up.
So again, it's about putting the needs of citizens first. We don't just put people in safeguard and train and fill in half a day of their time. We do it because at the end of the day, we will help achieve better outcomes for citizens if we do.
Well, thank you very much, Director. Are there any other questions or comments? In which case, I'm very grateful to you for coming before us today. Very much appreciate that. And we will be inviting you back again at some point in the future. And I think we can use the presentation given today. And I'm aware that presentation isn't uploaded to CMIS yet, but we can do that to use that perhaps as a basis of how we follow up in 6 months or so. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just a few minutes to change the dramatist personnel. To welcome Councillor Cotton back again. Very grateful. And also joined by officers, by Darren Hooday, our Director of HR and Organisation Development, and Waka Ahmed, our Assistant Director of Community Safety and Resilience. So, colleagues, Councillor Cotton, you've worked with us before. You know that, as Paxman says on University Challenge, you know the rules by now. Get on with it. So, over to you, really, to talk about this aspect of your presentation. You've already talked about the other areas of your portfolio. This is very much focused on that aspect of your area around personnel and organisation development and that community safety and resilience area.
Yeah.
So the difficult side, perhaps. Maybe not. But yes, I'll let you to introduce this area.
No, thanks, Chair. And I think, as you say, we're back again because of the breadth of this portfolio now. We couldn't fit it all into one session. So I'm going to keep my remarks brief. As you observed, I'm joined by Wakar and by Darren. So I'm going to ask Wakar and Darren to talk to a number of slides which have just been shared on the screen there, which set out some of the key issues around community safety and then people services. And I think would it be best to take this in chunks, that we do the community safety bit first and then move on to people services?
Yes, that would be helpful.
Okay. I'll ask Wakar then to lead up on community safety.
Okay. Good afternoon all. What we've put together today are some responses to some of the risks that we'd identified previously, just to give our committee the assurance that we're moving on some of these risks, but also happy to kind of talk through some of the wider aspects as well. So they might not be covered on the slides. I think the reassurance in terms of the wider approach that we've got to tackling things like antisocial behaviour, I'll be able to go in as well. So one of the key things for this year that has been very prevalent for community safety, not just for the council but our partners, is the governance review of community safety. Taking not just the lessons of the pre-COVID pandemic, but also the way we moved into a new way of hybrid working during COVID and how we responded beyond that. It was also really important that as things were suspended and paused as a result of the pandemic, that it was absolutely clear that the strategic that needed to be put together was actually taking on board more and more information from partners, and then had that wider cross-agency support that we were looking for. So what we've just undertaken the governance structure review for Birmingham's Community Safety Partnership with our partners. And the following slides will just give us a bit of an overview as to what that now looks like and how work around community safety will begin to move forward. The strategic assessment is going to be one of our key documents, because previous strategic assessments have heavily focused on police data. So as a result of assessments, quite a lot of the responses around community safety have therefore been around intervention as opposed to the responses that we want around prevention. So we're really, really keen that the strategic assessment that starts to come forward from police analysts also involve the work that Richard Brooks and colleagues are doing around the City Observatory, where it picks up the data that we pick up as a council, that then also enables a strategic assessment to talk to the whole council, as opposed to services that just provide crisis intervention and crisis management type services as well. The community triggers process was important for us last year as well. It was a new piece of work that we were moving forward with, but it was also clear that in order for us to have an effective community trigger process, we need to make sure that we also had elements of the community trigger process that enabled us to bring multiple services together as part of that review for community trigger, so that residents were given the reassurance that they need, that their issues that they were raising were being dealt with. So if at the start of them raising a community trigger in the first place, they were not content with the service being provided, we just want to make sure that if they are then raising a community trigger, that they're able to have the confidence across all partners that the issue that they've raised is being looked at appropriately and effectively as well. So it's not just a case that cases have been closed, where we can give that wider assurance. What we've done with the community trigger process is we've introduced an independent chair, so that this isn't just about the council almost kind of providing oversight for community trigger process, but actually we're working with our partners and we have an independent chair and we have support from national organisations like Resolve. So when we're looking at social behaviour in the main, we're making sure that the community trigger process, as it applies in Birmingham, has all of the national data that we're looking at, but also all of the local partners sat around the process. What this means for us is that we've seen over the last few months an increase in community triggers. So as awareness is now increasing with our communities, more and more residents are beginning to understand, when they can raise a community trigger and what that looks like. We need to get that out a lot more. So in the short term, we are probably going to increase in the number of community triggers that we have. But we're fairly confident that as a result of the processes that we're putting in place and the partners that we've got sat around the panels, we'll be able to manage that in a way that shows residents the assurance and gives them the assurance that their issues are being dealt with. The other thing that we've got going, which was considered an initial risk, was a domestic homicide review. So we have responsibility to make sure that reviews are undertaken when we have homicides. the issue that we had with this particular item was capacity and access of independent chairs. So our DHR team is funded by the Police and Crime Commissioner, and the number of DHRs that we have in Birmingham is on the increase, but we had a shortage of national independent authors in order for us to progress this activity. We've now worked in consultation with the Police and Crime Commissioner, as well as conversations with the Home Office, where we've supported the increase in the number of independent authors that we have, not just available as part of a national pot, but also as part of the local pool that we'll have regionally. Just bearing in mind that the authors are probably conducting 2 or 3 reviews, and they're probably not all Birmingham reviews as well. They're probably reviews elsewhere as well. So that was incredibly important. We're also involving the coroner at an early stage as well with the domestic homicide review process as well. So where we know that there are delays in the publication of DHRs as a result of either a lack of author or there are issues centrally with the Home Office in terms of their feedback to this, that also has an impact on the coroner to be able to close some of the cases that she's looking at. So we're making sure that our process within Birmingham goes hand in hand with the coroner's process as well, so that we're keeping everybody informed. The review of the capacity for the DHRs has been undertaken with the Police and Crime Commissioner. We have a offensive weapons pilot that is currently running as well, alongside the Home Office, and that is causing, I think, pressure on existing regional DHR teams. So the Police and Crime Commissioner is reviewing currently how much resource and support he is able to offer local DHR teams, and the Birmingham DHR team. There is a conversation about how we may be able to provide some regional support elsewhere as well. Now, that would mean that we increase the number of individuals that we have working there. The Police and Crime Commissioner is aware that that might be a resource request that comes back for that as well. The other key thing that we had for Birmingham was the increase in serious violence that we're seeing in the city, and unfortunately we've had further cases of serious violence recently as well. In fact, today is an important day because the serious violence duty comes into implementation today on 31st of January. So what we've been working on for Birmingham in preparation for the duty is working with the Violence Reduction Partnership to make sure Birmingham has a serious violence profile. So we've been working on putting that profile together, looking at all the activity that is being funded across the piece, not just by Birmingham City Council, but the resources that are being put in place by West Midlands Police, by the Youth Empowerment Fund, by work that the DFE is doing through the Alternative Provision Task Force, and just making sure that we are prepared for what will be a year of putting together a strategy which the intentions or the expectations from government are that all local areas have a robust serious violence strategy by the end of December 2023. We're ahead of that space at the moment. The space that we're in currently just needs socialising the strategy with CLT within Birmingham and with the partner agencies that are out there. So there's a draft strategy that has been put together based on the strategic assessment that was put together for Birmingham as well. And we're hoping that the governance review structure, which we'll show on the next slide, has then led to a Birmingham Reducing Violence Board that then works alongside the Violence Reduction Partnership. So each local authority will have a Violence Reduction Board that will then oversee the partnership activity from a local basis. So this next slide really is an overview of the thematic groups that have emerged as a result of the governance review. And under each one of those thematic groups are the different areas that they'll be looking at. So we've agreed that the Community Safety Partnership will be looking at the thematic groups from a whole partnership perspective, and it's not just left to the local authority to be bringing together the governance aspects of the Community Safety Partnership, but actually we put the emphasis on all of our partners to take responsibility for the bits of business that they have responsibility for, and then going back to what we believe actually the Crime and Disorder Act of 1998, which we think needs updating given a number of additional responsibilities that have emerged over the last decade or so through new legislation, through the introduction of police and crime commissioners. So what this governance review looks like is the local authority will take the lead building safer neighbourhoods thematic group, and that's due to the work that we do around locality working, the work and influence that we have around community cohesion, resilience, the work that we do around PSPOs and antisocial behaviour. Then having a clear link back to the integrated care board, where protecting people from harm, they take a much more of a lead role in making sure that the work that needs to be led across the system is then led by the ICB. And then the tackling violence one, given that there is a clear role for West Midlands Police in this as well, they will be taking the government's responsibility around tackling violence. However, we will be supporting the prevention theme within that, because the prevention elements of tackling violence is hugely important for us. And then the fourth board is the reducing reoffending. Now, there's a theme through this, and this is basically bringing us back to the basics. And that's back to the basics of what community safety partnerships need to be responding to and delivering against. Alongside that, we've got certain duties that are discharged elsewhere. So we've got the drugs and mental health work that is discharged through other boards. We've got the work around missing and neglect, which is discharged through other boards. And we've got the prevent agenda, which is discharged through the prevent board and the contest board. And then linked to that will be our work around community voice and communications, making sure that communities are involved in all aspects of the governance structure, but are also there to be represented in having their voice heard as we produce policies and move forward with our action plans. And then the communications one, really important. There's an element of us having comms internally, but also externally. So how do we socialise the work, partnership across the system with different departments, different agencies, but then how do we do that internally as well?
And I wondered, there's some excellent slides here now updating us on the domestic abuse situation, but I'm wondering whether that map that you brought on the previous slide could perhaps be the focus of the committee's discussions. And I don't know whether, first, I've got some questions, so that we can move on to the second part as well. Thank you very much for that presentation. I don't know whether any colleagues have any specific questions that they'd like to raise. Again, I have some to come, but I'll take them first.
Yes, I mean, I've got quite a few, only just because I'm just trying to understand what the Birmingham Community Safety Partnership in this group is, and actually then what it is, the duty that's coming in. So, and apologies if this is just, it's new to me, and so it's all kind of, right. So if you could just explain kind of quite simply then, what is this new duty that that the local authorities are being passed down to us? If you could just start with that for me.
So that's a serious violence duty.
Yeah.
So what the serious violence duty is asking not just local authorities, but all specified authorities to do, is to give additional thought in terms of our responses to tackling serious violence. And what that will include are making sure that we have effective governance structures in place locally, that we have an effective strategy that looks across the system. So it includes things like housing. So when we have issues of serious violence, there are questions about providing urgent accommodation for all as well. It has some specified roles for other agencies as well. So that will be roles for prison, probation and policing as well. But from a local authority perspective, it's the governance around the duty, the strategy and the work that we will do around housing and education.
And how is that monitored? I guess I'm coming at from a kind of, there's kind of risk in this. You know, if we're having as a local authority a duty being passed down to us. And so just ensuring that we understand the extent of what we are to do. So is it just that we have to produce a strategy and that is then we provide that to them, and then it's a kind of, yes, you have done, or and if there are any aspects of this then in your the community safety operations group, this then, or is this is the community safety operations group kind of come as a result of this duty, or is it something slightly different, or is it?
So one of our responsibilities is to bring together partners so that we have a partnership governance structure. So the Birmingham Community Safety Partnership is the overall governance structure for community safety related issues.
And that's a statutory duty that we have, I think, under the 1998 Act, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. So this is we've always had this statutory duty to do this. Yeah. So this additional duty that we're getting, is that's something slightly different.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So this is something that's been brought in by government more recently, which we're now picking up and managing through the Community Safety Partnership.
So we're adding to an existing structure that we've already got. Yeah. Right. Okay. So this Community Safety Partnership. Just all the different. Right. Birmingham Community Safety Partnership Executive Board. So this group had we've had this established already, and this has been going for some time, and this is a statutory, and this is right. So this is kind of an update on what we've had in place for a while. Yeah. But then when you mention the additional duty and the violence, right? Yeah, that is a additional.
Yeah, this is something we're now picking up as part of a new.
And we can put in and fit in with what we're already doing. Right. Okay. Fine. And so in terms of our statutory duty and this Birmingham Community Safety Partnership. So this has been going on for some time, and that's a statutory duty. And how does what's our statutory duty in terms of as a local authority?
So I forget the exact wording in the Act unless you've got it. So it's essentially to reduce crime and to work with partners to reduce crime and antisocial behaviour.
And what we've got on the right-hand side are the thematic groups to take us back to the statutory duty responsibilities. So it's working place-based to make sure that we're bringing to bear the system to help reduce crime. It's protecting people from harm. It's making sure that we're able to reduce violence, but also reduce reoffending in the main.
And so there is actually sorry, do you mind sharing?
No, not sorry.
Okay. And there is an executive board that is set up. So we have, and who's that made up of?
So that's chaired by me.
Right.
And then that is composed of a number of statutory partners. So the police, Matt Sher is the Chief Superintendent.
Yeah.
West Midlands Police is the Vice Chair of that board.
Yeah.
It then includes representatives from probation. We've got social housing partnership representatives on there. We've got the Fire and Rescue Authority represented on there as well. Who else have we got around that table? Children's Trust, the ICB. So it's a range of statutory partners, all of whom will have some influence over either the directly engaging in the prevention of reduction of crime and antisocial behaviour or the prevention. And actually, one of the key things for us is how you kind of move that upstream. So we're preventing people falling into situations of crime or offending behaviour.
Right. So as a board, you meet and are able to keep on a track, and keep an overview of making sure that actually each partner is ensuring that they are carrying on their statutory duty.
So we own the strategy, and then the operations group is effectively the doing bit that sits underneath around delivery, and thematic groups kind of own different bits of that operational piece. As set out there. So you've got a group that's set around building safer neighbourhoods, you've got the one that's around tackling violence, and all of this is informed by the strategic assessment that we do, which is the bit that Braco referred to around the data. So we're ensuring that what we're doing actually matches the picture that we know exists in our city around crime and antisocial behaviour. Then underneath all of that is the other bit, which is the colourful map of Birmingham in the bottom left-hand corner, which are the local partnership delivery groups.
Right.
So those are effectively clusters of wards as colour-coded there, which bring together partners at a more local level. So you've kind of got citywide stuff, and then at the local level, those kind of conversations that take place around how do we tackle a specific set of issues, say for instance in East Birmingham, or whichever geographic locality it is. We're doing some further work around reforming those at the moment to ensure that they're properly plugged in, particularly to elected members.
Yeah.
So it's a better local connection as well.
And sorry.
Just when the time.
No, it was, that's, I just, because I've not come across this and I didn't really understand what you're talking about to be, but I've got a better idea now. But yeah, I just wanted to get an idea just because there is a statutory obligation that we are, and the structure, the governance structure. The other thing that I was just querying, and it's the use of language, and explain to me, community triggers. What do you mean by the word community triggers?
So the community trigger is when a resident is not happy with the response that they've had to their antisocial behaviour issue. They're able to now alert authorities to review that process, and that's what the community trigger is. So it gives residents the opportunity to challenge any responses they've had around antisocial behaviour.
And that's a legal right. I think, is it the 2014 Act? I forget. Yeah. It's a more recent legal right that we.
Okay. Right. No, yes, I've not come across that phrase before. Actually, but it's quite. Yeah. Sorry, carry on. Yeah.
Thanks for answering. Is there any further questions, Councillor Khan, Councillor Jenkins? My question is: you mentioned it in your response there, Councillor Cotton, about the role of the elected member within a ward. So my question to you would be: how confident do you think elected members are in this map and understanding their role in this map?
Well, I think the fact that we're looking at revisiting some of these arrangements indicates perhaps how confident I am in the current arrangements. I do. One of the things is essentially just changing the names of local partnership delivery groups to local community safety partnerships, so people are absolutely clear what that body is. One of the frustrations I think we've had around the LPDGs or LCSPs, as I've moved to, is that we're working on quite a large, big geographical footprint. And partly that was a reflection of the situation that we found ourselves in over the last few years, where we've had to work across a wider footprint simply because we don't have the degree of capacity that perhaps we'd like in an ideal world. I think there's more that we need to do around how we ensure that all elected members, if not directly engaged in the work of those local partnerships, are at least fully advised and briefed on what's happening and the processes that they can use when they're encountering issues in their own wards. So I think there's more to do there, and I'm hopeful that over the course of this year we will start to further strengthen that.
And I think, grateful for that answer. I think the kind of sub of that, if you like, is that this is part of a key partnership that the council has with West Midlands Police. And one of the challenges, and I'm looking at this reason from the role of an elected member, because I think his role is to reassure the rest of our elected members that these things are happening. But elected members play a very key role, particularly with regard to this understanding, translating, navigating a community through difficult times, and many of those difficult times would come within this. Elected members and that partnership, how are you and your work, Raka, how are you facilitating better working between Birmingham City Council and West Midlands Police, and particularly the role of the elected member in understanding their connection to their local West Midlands Police team? And where there are challenges with that, as we know there may well be, and again, I'm not being specific on this because I know it is not within the remit of this committee to look at auditing with regard to West Midlands Police. How do you navigate that system?
So it's a good question, and I suppose the map is indicative of some of those challenges, because initially when we had a point in time when the police had 10 command units and then they moved down to 5 and now they've got 2, and I think there's talk about moving down to 1. What we've got in terms of the local structures is, well, the boundaries have then also shifted because of the way the police boundaries work, and that causes a lot of tension for members, because our ward boundaries and the boundaries that local policing neighbourhood teams use are not coterminous. And as a result of that, what we get are, a ward councillor may end up having to deal with 2 neighbourhood policing teams for an issue. 3, okay. And so that's led to the council working on 2 specific pilots with West Midlands Police. One is around trying to understand how we work locally. So we've got the work through the neighbourhood action coordinators that we've just recently introduced. And the police are also trying to bring forward their local neighbourhood offer, so that we have a person, both from a local authority perspective and a policing perspective, who can coordinate services, find the right services, so that members aren't left asking, the local partnership delivery group or others, where do we get this work being done from? And that's a pilot that we've extended in to this next financial year as well. I think it started off with 2 neighbourhoods, We've now got neighbourhood action coordinators across 20 wards, and we'll see how that progresses moving forward. From West Midlands Police perspective, of course, they've got a new chief constable who's really keen on the locality offering neighbourhood working. My understanding is that they will review what they've got in terms of their 2 command units, whether that goes into a single command unit or whether that's something that they extend out further. But it's important that we have presence locally on the ground. That's a challenge for us as a local authority, and it's a challenge for West Midlands Policing. It's why I think the reassurance that the Police and Crime Commission was giving to us is increased officers on the ground to support council services as well, so that there's presence locally. For members, we're hoping through the new governance structure and the redefining of the local partnership delivery groups as community safety partnerships are then clear as to what those groups support. So you have your ward forums, and you'll know what you deal with in the ward forums through the ward plans. And then the local community safety partnership is where we deal with things like antisocial behaviour, the place-based issues that you're identifying, because not everything fits neatly within the community safety space. So we have fly tipping, for example, we have a range of other issues, and that's why the neighbourhood action coordinators will be that link between the different service areas.
We'd be keen to hear any updates by reports to the committee from time to time. Thank you very much, Councillor Conn, and thank you very much for that part of your session. Councillor Conn, I invite you to move on to the second part.
Okay, part 2 of Act 2. So I'll ask Darren, if I may, to pick up on the second part of this presentation around people services, which of course is the bit that moved into this portfolio more recently following the May election. So, Darren.
Thank you, Councillor Cotton. Good afternoon, committee members. I think I've got 10 minutes, is that right, Chair?
I can be slightly flexible with that time.
Okay, well, I'll look to get through the slides and just put out some key points and then have some time for questions. So just in terms of setting context, we are people services, so I'm interim director of people services, no longer HR and organisational development. I make the distinction because, with the support of the Cabinet, we've got an injection of investment around 3 million, 4 million a year. And I'm pleased to say that we are taking the function from what was one of fairly unstable, under-resourced function to stability, and now to a point of more performing. So we've had a fair bit of forming and storming over the last 12 months. We are a completely new structure. We've moved from about 80 heads to around about 150, and I've met them all. We've had them upstairs on a couple of occasions to bring the team together. It is a new team, obviously a lot of new people, highly diverse, although less diverse at senior level, but that's something that we are aware of and working on. And there have been a number of iterations around the structure as we've moved to more maturity. So I'm pleased to say now that we've got 2 out of 3 of the AD posts secured as permanent members of staff, and most of the team below that are now permanent. So there is a lot more stability. There's a lot more service mentality around how we serve our internal customers. And I've got some examples to share with you. But around our maturity, I think what I wanted to do here is to share our priorities in terms of how we serve the business. So there are 3 key, what I would call strategic priorities that ordinarily you wouldn't see in another organisation. And they're unique to Birmingham City Council and around the maturity of our organisation and the timing of certain things. So those 3 areas are the job evaluation programme. So that is going to be the largest job evaluation programme in the UK that we're commencing across all the roles. And that review will take anywhere between 1 and 3 years, depending on our approach, which we're finalising. And so that's the pay and grading process. The second key strategic priority of the JE is EBEB. So everyone's battle, everyone's business. So again, it's unique to Birmingham, and it's a key focus. And I'm going to highlight a few of the areas that we're focusing on in people services as objective by And the third and final strategic objective is Oracle. So we have embraced Oracle in people services. It's our sort of front shop window. It's the first point of call for a lot of queries or to seek advice or to do a lot of transactional things. And we are determined to drive and optimize every bit of efficiency that Oracle allows us to do and was intended for. We've had to do some reverse engineering around the preparation in leading up to Oracle to do that. But a lot of that work is now done, and that is helping the service in terms of the first point of call contact. So there are 3 strategic priorities: getting the software and the technology for our front of house and our touch points. JE, job evaluation program, so every role in the council will be reviewed, and the EVV. So, and under that, we've got a number of other priorities, which I'm also going to touch on today. And, we've had discussions in this committee around the role of resourcing, around talent management, around retention, and a lot of our shorter term priorities are fit for purpose. So how we develop talent through our organisation, which supports EV, our recruitment. So we have a turnover around 900 or 1,000 staff a year, around about 9%. That's reasonably difficult, but we can be a lot more efficient in how we do our recruitment, but also in terms of another thing that we've discussed here around scarce resource and those roles that are harder to fill. We've made some big improvements around how we attract more diversity into Birmingham, not just diversity around, say, gender or ethnic background, but also diversity around skills. So there are some of the areas that I'm going to highlight. And a number of the bits of work that we're doing, some of the longer term pieces, we've got governance around that through the CPMO. So we're being held to account and making sure that we've got a good level of governance around our improvements and what we deliver. So that's by way of an introduction. What I'm going to cover in addition to that is just focus a little bit on EBB, Objective 5, workforce transition, talk a bit more about that, resourcing and recruitment, and interims and consultants. So here is EBB, Objective 5. Much of that is in my directorate, and we've taken a real lead on this. Previously, there have been questions in our organisation as to the trust in what was an HROD function around us leading this, and some criticism. I'm pleased to say that the feedback we're getting as a function is much more positive, and our workforce do trust our role in driving the agenda around EBB. And that's largely driven by a lot of things that we've done in the last 6 months, things that we've delivered on the ground, events that have covered many of our employees. And I think people can really notice that we are serious about EBB and we're putting in positive action to demonstrate it. So these are the areas that summarise the work streams: awareness and engagement, data insight. So we've gone out and we've asked every employee to update their personal data around the characteristics, protected characteristics. So we've got a lot more up-to-date data now. We're looking at the job evaluation process. Will also improve job descriptions and fairness and equity, which will help. It's about visible leadership, and Becky here in council management is a good example where we've led the way around our engagement sessions. We've had a number of presentations, but very engaging ones, very interactive ones, where we've opened a lot of conversations around how people feel in this organisation, how they trust this organisation, what we could do more of, what the demands of our employees around career development, for example. and just creating more opportunities. So we've done a lot of work at the J and C level, and we have a dashboard now that monitors all the characteristics, including ethnic diversity, for example, and we're monitoring every level of J and C, and we're going to be rolling that out now through the organisation Nexus for these 7 Cs. So where we need to improve is the flow of talent from grade 6s and 7s into J and C. So we've got some great people in this organisation who aren't necessarily identified as talent, because we don't have a formal talent identification process. And therefore, by not having that, we can't be targeted around that career development and succession planning. So they are some of the short-term objectives that we're working on as a function to put that right, which of course will support CBD. Let's just move on to the next slide. So here's some of the examples. I talked about EBV. We've gone out into the organisation. It's been very visible. We've had some great responses. We're working with our allies networks as well. And I think we can say that we've got a far better relationship and trusting relationship with the allies network and with Richard Brooks' directorate. We're working far more closely with Richard and his team as a combined effort. So as a CLT and ECLT, we've had a lot of diversity training. Unconscious bias, for example, we recognised in our own cohort we needed to do more work on that and have those conversations and increase our own awareness. It starts at the top, so we've done a lot of work ourselves and we've rolled that out to the whole of ECLT, and we continue to do so across the whole of the organisation. So there's some highlights there, which you can see. Move on to the next slide. A couple of things here. I've mentioned the job evaluation programme, so we won't say any more about that at this point. But I did want to talk about workforce transition. So very often there is talk in this organisation about culture, around the motivation of our employees and middle management, how motivated people are to create more pace around the work that they do, to what extent are our employees behind the chief executive and the senior team, their priorities, have they bought into it, do they understand it? And it's fair to say that varies across all levels of our organisation. Now, workforce transition is a phrase that we're using to describe what I would probably say is a cross between organisational change and moving to a more mature organisation that is also more performance focused and more diverse. So there's a number of elements to this, but the one I wanted to highlight is something called a MARS programme, which is a mutually acceptable resignation scheme. And that will allow anyone in the organisation to leave the organisation should they wish for a settlement agreement up to a maximum of 12 months. So, now we have the ability to say no. It's mutually agreed. So we have some control around using our best people and our talent. Conversely, we can have conversations with individuals whose motivation is not what we expect as a standard across the organisation, or perhaps get change weary and not fully supported with where this organisation needs to go. If I look at all our employer relations cases, 80% of those cases are by a small number of individuals, probably 20%. And if we can help people make the right decision for them, where Birmingham City Council is no longer really their employer, or they want it to be their employer, they can move on. But we are going to enable those conversations and those moves. This will help us to turbocharge a bit of culture change around bringing in a more diverse, more useful organisation, more performance focused. And it will also mean that those that, if we have pockets of those that want to litigate against the council, who are entrenched on disrupting what management are trying to do locally, and it's very disruptive. So, apart from all the other things that are available to us through employee relations policies, etc., this is a way of offering a way out for those that probably do need to move on. So we're expecting this to come online in the next couple of months. It's just been finalised in terms of the aspects, the pension aspects, etc. So, and we know that in operations, for example, as just one example, City Ops, we think there could be some take-up. Or trade unions are very positive about it. I actually want to work with us to implement it. So this is just one area that we're working on as a priority. So this is one of our what I would call short-term priorities. Earlier, job evaluation. It is a huge program. We want to accelerate this. I won't start talking about equal pay here because some of you have heard me do that before, but we don't have time. But you'll know that equal pay is something that's been plaguing the council for almost a decade, with over £1 billion worth of claims already paid. We have to close the door on these, and we have to have a robust job evaluation system that we can rely on in the future that mitigates any potential claims going forward. Now, until we deliver that, we have an ongoing liability. So this is really crucial to closing down equal pay once and for all. At the moment, we have a gauge-based system that is quite typical in councils, but to use that in this process could take up to 3 years. So we are doing a lot of work at the moment to see how that can be accelerated to something more in the region of 12 months, because that would save 2 years of ongoing liability. So that is another key area at the moment to work on. I'll want to allow just one. Go on quickly. Just, I know this is. I'm going to move on from here and just go straight to the recruitment slide, if I may. Okay, let's get to the end slide. Just on recruitment, we've talked about recruitment here before, and I know it was a concern of the audit committee around how we retain people, but also how we reach the market. Now, over a number of years, this isn't on the slide, but I just want to introduce it because it's relevant to interims and consultants. The only way in which you can get a job through our ads in Birmingham City Council is through West Midlands employees. Now, not many people go to that website to find jobs, and 80% of the UK workforce now apply for jobs on a mobile device. The application on West Midlands employees, which is our one portal, is very limited around application forms, and unfortunately we get the same people applying, and they are generally in the same diversity group, which is not very diverse, and generally older. That's not how a diverse, youthful city apply for jobs. And I'm delighted to say today that we have changed that, and you can now we'll have our own website, and we're going on our own website and our intranet site. It's all linked into LinkedIn, by Google Jobs, Indeed, a lot of the websites that you're familiar with that are literally leading the way around people applying for jobs on their mobile. You can apply by using a CV. It's much more flexible than it's ever been, and we're convinced and we know that is already making an impact. The big campaigns like social workers, we've used advertising, And we've recruited 70 social workers in the last 6 or 7 months. And that's carrying a 30% vacancy gap. So there's a lot of activity in recruitment and really good progress. And we're noticing that the diversity and the talent that we're being able to recruit. And I'm pleased to say that the agency workers, and this is why I wanted to come on to this now, around interims consultants, most of the agency staff we have in Birmingham, social work, social care, are now permanent members of staff, because it's a far better attractive proposition around the salary and the remuneration. So we're now gaining people that are in the Birmingham City Council area coming back into our organisation who were previously working in Shrewsbury, Telford, Coventry, Staffs, the whole of the West Midlands area. They're coming back to Birmingham City Council, so we're attracting that talent back. And that's really good news, because previously we were losing social workers and asking others in a small team already depleted to take on their casework. And now it's just putting people under a lot of pressure. We had a lot of high sickness, and of course we were failing potentially volunteers. But I'm pleased to say that we've turned that around. So that's one of the big achievements of people's services in the last 12 months.
Thank you, Darren. Appreciate that. I'm aware that we've slightly run, but I do want to extend a little bit, because I think there are some key questions with regard to your portfolio. But I wondered if, before I launch into my questions, is there any questions from Councillor Jenkins, Councillor Clark, I suppose?
One question. Did you say there's 150 people in the HR department?
Yes.
That seems reasonable to you, does it?
Well, I've worked across different ratios in different businesses. And I would say that this is on the lean side. It might sound generous, but an organisation of 10,000, and given our payroll was over 20,000, and of course we're also responsible for schools HR. And one of the things that we set out to do is to provide a much better service on things like employee relations. So 80% of our long-term employee relation cases now gone. We've got the backlog right down. And one of the biggest complaints sometimes that councils receive from trade unions and employers is that I've been suspended for 12 months or my case hasn't gone anywhere. And we've got 12 cases now, but only 12 cases, that's still too many, 12 cases that prior to 2022. So, that's one of the benefits of having 150 people. We can really start to wrap our arms around this and you want to have these things festering for too long, which is neither good for the employee or the organisation.
That's perfect.
Yeah, I just have a couple. And I think potentially maybe, and I don't know if the chair might agree with this, but in terms of the job evaluation, because obviously that is a concern in terms of our risk, our ongoing risk, in terms of an equal pay that we have to manage. And if it is the ability to be able to reduce the time frame for a job evaluation to be carried out with 3 years, if you're able to provide us with a kind of update of what that might be, like how you're going to do it, and whether that is additional funding and resourcing, because there is a kind of cost analysis, really, isn't it, to be able to say, well, actually, do you put in, is it that you have to put in the resources because we have to mitigate actually 3 years of potential liability or exposure for the rest, but then there is also the consciousness that actually any job evaluation has to be done properly, because actually done it before, and if you don't, and it is a incredibly difficult task because the jobs are so different, and ensuring that you are actually making that the tasks are properly evaluated. So I just like probably something going forward for this committee. I'd just like us to be able to keep an eye on that and provide updates, regular updates in terms of the job evaluation. The other quick one, which actually you might be able to provide info for me for after this, is just in terms of looking at diversity and staffing. I mean, do you have any figures in terms of flexible working requests, or do we have a flexible working policy within the council? Because I've been looking at whether there are, I mean, I appreciate that it's something that can encourage particularly women, and women are always actually the ones who are having to work part-time for childcare, etc. So if you have got any figures for some flexible working, appreciate those. Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
So that's two actions there that Councillor Carr has agreed to bring to.
Yeah, I think we should add to Councillor Perk's comments. Can we know how many people are still working at home? And what proportion of the workforce are coming into the office? What proportion of days? I mean, you don't have to answer now, but I think that's relevant as well in terms of a flexible working inquiry.
And I can.
It is with regard to the policy, but if the policy is set, then and employees are working according to a policy agreed. If it's those council staff that are not conforming to the policy set, how many? I guess the challenge would be how many council staff are, and again, the city solicitor will navigate me through this, are essentially not meeting the standards set out in a working from home hybrid office requirements.
I think I would like just to come back on this point. So we have a very clear policy. You'll know it's called New Ways of Working. We consulted upon it with the trade unions and our employees, and it's very clear. There is no specific mandated days at home. It's a completely hybrid model that is completely flexible based on the need. And you come into the workplace if you need to. For example, if a manager on occasion wants people in a room because it's a different sort of meeting, needs to generate ideas or whatever it might be, or it's a monthly meeting, and a number of meetings now are becoming more face to face. So I think with all the restrictions lifted, I know certainly across J&C grades, we're having at least one of our weekly meetings once a month is in person, for example, and that's become much more common. And that's not just here across J&C; it's across our other sites, including Cock Street. But there is no specific, so we do not monitor how many days people are at home or in the office. We do need to make sure that we've got enough office space to fulfil the demand, and we're doing that quite adequately at the moment.
It's not quite the same though, is it? I mean, the fact that someone might agree to come in now and again if their manager, begs them and decides to have a meeting. But what we identify is that some people are just not suited to working from home because they lack the disciplines to do it. But also there's a recognition that having everybody together in one place, it leads to improvements in productivity that are not achieved if they're all sitting at home. So, I think we need to be saying, and I know the chief executive feels this way, and we're in agreement on that, which is interesting. I know we need to have people coming into work. Right.
So the challenge, Councillor James, just as chair, is that this committee is not able to interfere with any changes to an employee contract, i.e. the terms and conditions with which our employees work. This committee is really here for assurance of the members that the delivery of those policies, the holding of members to account for that contract, I guess, would be. So the question needs to be reframed to the cabinet member, to the officer. How is that implemented?
No, because one of the things we have to address is value for money. And if our workforce are all sitting at home, we're not getting good value for money.
But you have no indicator around productivity.
That's why I'm asking.
I don't think, Chair, with the greatest respect, that is an appropriate question for this committee to ask. Yes, this committee does have a responsibility around value for money, but I think what this committee would be more concerned about if the performance levels of delivery of services dropped suddenly or were consistently poor and failed to meet the frameworks which have been set by Deborah as the head of paid service in consultation with her colleagues. It is not for this committee to mandate or give a view on the working arrangements for the staff that Birmingham City Council employs.
So my very first question today was, is this an appropriate way for Audit Committee to conduct itself, having presentations from Cabinet members? You all said it was. I'm now asking questions of it, and you're telling me that's not the role of the Audit Committee. We can't obtain good value for money if everybody we employ just sits at home. Now, I'm not ruling out, I mean, let me say, I say this as someone who has worked from home for over a decade. I'm not opposed to working from home, but we have to recognise that some organisations and some functions need people in the office. I mean, even Google has said this. Tesla have said it. You know, I mean,
again, the challenge is we as members do not have the ability to intervene within the working contract of our employees of this council. And the current leadership of the council under the chief executive have deemed a fit and proper policy with regard to working from home. That's not within the remit of us as members or this audit committee to do that. So, Councillor Jenkins, I won't be able to allow your question. So I'm going to move on, but we can. I would encourage you to talk to the city solicitor and the director, who I'm sure will be able to remain in the room for a couple of minutes to get to grips with what the number of that question is, because the question is about a challenge around a policy that may be
and performance management, and also adherence to equalities, and as regards the employment contract we have as well. So it is absolutely fundamental that we also honour our public sector equality duties. We honour human rights principles, so that we are a responsible employer. And as long as a number of caveats are met, this committee just needs the assurance that we are employing the right people with the right skill set in the right job, and that the head of paid service is empowered by the council to ensure that services are delivered in the right way. So, and go back to my previous comment, that the assurance function of this committee is around any significant concerns around performance and delivery of services. And I do think I support the views made by external audit earlier. I do think it's appropriate that cabinet members are in attendance here, because the key question is about members asking questions around assurance of the information that you've heard, and giving direction to the cabinet member about the topics which particularly may cause you concern, or where you need that assurance at this point in time of your work programme. So it's a bit of a long answer, but I'm still of the view that Councillor Jenkins' question on that issue is inappropriate, but I come back to assurance and performance and meeting our statutory responsibilities as an employer.
I'm used to being in a minority of one all the time I sit on this committee, and I find myself so again. But I think out in the real world, I think the public would take quite a different view.
Okay, so my question, moving on from that, then, is this issue of performance and police committees concerned about the performance of your department. You mentioned at the start of your presentation of how you've moved the performance of the department on, and I'm glad to hear this, and this committee will be very much supportive of that.
So I'd just like to say, if I may, to my chair, just that in terms of this organisation, most organisations in the country and the world are outcome-based. It's no different at BCC. We measure things based on outcomes. That's the ends. The means of whether you're at home or you're at work is almost immaterial. And if we talk about competitiveness, people join us because we have a flexible approach to hybrid working, which is sensible and based on the need. And that's a huge competitive advantage. And yes, more people are coming back to work, and people recognise the value of face-to-face meetings. But I'm afraid I can't agree on the premise that I've heard that, value for money is based on, somebody not working from home and being in the office. Because most of the evidence that I've read, within the profession of people services and HR, all of the evidence mounts towards, if you give people more flexibility, you trust them, it's better for their well-being, it's more flexible, and productivity increases massively. So, I'd just like to put that on record that, we're working around these principles and being a competitive organisation and not measuring people for where they're working, but, the outcomes that they produce.
And I'm very grateful for that statement. So to just moving to that, to the two issues that I'm interested in challenging your department on the delivery against are those issues that we come back time and time again. You refer to them and you've showed some success around, one of which is recruitment, and one of which is morale and staff feeling confident and within the organisation. So going back to recruitment, you've taken us on a trajectory to a better place. We talked about the 7, and indeed Alex was here before you talking about the successes you've had around social work, which is a real good case study of how things are working, what remain the barriers around attracting people to to fill the spaces we need to fill in Birmingham City Council? Because I think sure members are aware that there are some areas of the council where we still have significant vacancies and significant need to recruit.
So the things I mentioned will make a massive difference, and they're only just starting to make that difference. So there's a big long tail on that, and I think that will be sustainable going forward. Some of the other areas we're working on is job descriptions and how they're written, and adverts and how they're written. So we've had quite a battle sometimes with managers around changing their thinking around standard JD does not cut it. If people do not get out of bed for a JD, they get out of bed for in terms of being attracted to a company and a role, on the descriptors of that role and what they'll be involved in. The JD just does do that. So we're looking at the language, and particularly what attracts people to a certain language. It's very often geared towards male rather than female. So we're looking at the language around adverts. So the JE program, because all job descriptions be rewritten, that's a perfect opportunity in which to get that right. But adverts is really important. We've got some great capabilities in function now who are experts in this. So we've recruited permanent people where they are helping educate managers across the organisation around how you market your function, you market your team, you market PCC, and what's in it for the individual. So I've given some examples, but we need to continue to do more of that. And some bits in the process, so things get stuck. We've now outsourced all the pre-employment checks. Previously, we let managers do that, and sometimes it would take months to get someone in the organisation. Well, when you've got delays, people will go to the next job offer. So you've got to be really quick. So it's not just about getting the attraction right. You've got to follow the process very quickly, because we found that across JNC that if we can't get a panel together within a few weeks, then we've lost our best candidates. It's a very fast-moving environment. So some of it's process orientated, it's also around training managers and getting them to work more closely in partnership with our team.
And what are the next stages of barriers that you're working on to overcome?
Well, I think the EBB piece of work is around inclusivity. And I think we've got to know if we attract more diversity, they've got to be included. And that's something that, the awareness. So we're also monitoring retention already across JNC. And we'll be measuring retention more closely across grade 6 and 7. So I think we need to make sure that when we recruit diversity, we retain diversity.
And I welcome that statement. And actually, everyone's the principles there are very much something with everyone's battle, everyone's business is absolutely something that I know that we're committed to as council. You mentioned in your statement this issue of needing to help others to transition out of the organisation for whatever changes and specifics they have within their kind of current context, which I felt quite an interesting challenge. So what assurance could you give this committee that you don't replace those individuals that you're talking about? They don't leave the organisation successfully, they're off-boarded, I think, in terms. We then onboard new people and they don't find themselves in exactly the same position, because actually the issue isn't with the individual, the issue is within the context within which they work. How confident are you that any other underlying factors that may be leading to that situation, that need to offboard, is not an institutional issue, it is an issue that is about the individual?
That's a good question. I'm really sorry. And I think most of us know that you leave an organisation generally because of your boss. Not necessarily because the relationship with your boss may feel respect and value, not necessarily based on the salary of the organisation. And there is a lot of change going across most jobs where we're updating and refreshing our management and our leadership. And very often I ask directors the question, if we're trying to change, is it the wrong structure with the right leadership, or is it the wrong leadership with the right structure? And they're the sort of things that we're asking. And if it is around not having the right leadership, where we've got a retention issue, then you're absolutely, we need to address that as much as bringing new people in.
So I think you and I can talk for a long time. So I'm very grateful to this director. But the final question, I am aware that we're running out of time, is that issue of how much management training do we do, and what is the process for a manager for us to ensure that a manager is trained to a standard which enables them and those that they manage to excel.
So one of the things that will be probably within 18 months is a new leadership framework around what we based on our values, but what we value around leadership behaviour. We don't have something like that at the moment. So in terms of your question, it's how we manage people's performance around what we expect from leaders, but also a lot of that you can do through assessment, through the recruitment process. So at the moment, we assess for competence and experience. We don't necessarily assess around, what are you like as a leader, and how does that fit with the leadership that we value in this organisation. So that is something missing. That's slightly longer term, but we recognise that it's a gap at the moment. We can't fit everything at the same time, but that will help us.
So thank you for that, and I'll be very keen to have an update in the future. Final question to Councillor Cotton, though I think you may want to refer to the director, is how confident, Councillor Cotton, are you that every single employee in Birmingham City Council understands what everyone's battle, everyone's business is about?
I don't think we're entirely there yet, to be candid, Chair. I think we've done a lot of work to raise awareness around the values and the actions that are set out in EBEB, and that work is ongoing. So everything from Your Diversity Matters campaign, we've planned up slides, through to a lot of the work that we've been doing through the Teams live events, the stuff that's cascaded out through management teams and out to localities as well. All of that is about constantly driving that message home. I think that then will help to contribute to some of the issues you've just been talking about in terms of what encourages people to remain within the City Council. And key to that has to be about having being able to bring your authentic self to work and having that respected and empowered. We know we've still got issues here, not least because of the figures around the disclosure of protected characteristics. We know there are still gaps. All credit to the department for the work that's been done to narrow that gap in terms of disclosure massively compared to where it was just 2 years ago. But the fact that people are still not coming forward with a full picture of what their protected characteristics are shows that there's still some way to go on that. And also, the more information we have, the clearer we can be about who works for us and how we then need to flex and change some of our responses to ensure people are included. So it is a bit like painting the fourth bridge. The job, I don't think it'll ever be entirely done because this is a constantly evolving organisation, but we just need to continue to get that message out there.
So who's missing? Who's not participating? I'm not asking necessarily for an answer to that. And what are we doing about those that aren't participating? And I don't necessarily mean that those that are not confident in coming forward, but I mean that those that might be resistant.
Do you mean which cohort of people?
Yeah, just more a theoretical thought experiment. There are people that are missing from this part. There's that lack of confidence that everybody understands this, and how are we tackling that theoretical cohort? I'm not asking for specifics to go down. How are we getting as close to zero as we possibly can?
This is a bit like answering the Donald Rumsfeld thing, isn't it? About known unknowns and unknown knowns. And so we're kind of learning as we're going along here. And I think we've learned a lot as we've got more disclosure, done those Your Diversity Matters campaigns and got more people to come forward. I think the other key part of this has been the work that we're doing with the trade unions and our staff diversity networks to kind of build that trust and confidence. The other thing, just to flag, which I think will help with this, is the review that we've commissioned from an independent organisation to look at our HR function with a specific reference around race equality and other equality issues. That is underway at the moment. There will be some very interesting recommendations, I think, that come from that work, which we will then look to embed as well. I think that will also pick up some of those issues around who is not coming forward, the reasons why they're not coming forward, and the steps we need to take to build that trust and confidence.
Well, I think that's really helpful. I'm aware I'm being taken liberties here. But one of the interesting things, Birmingham is, as the race and census as well, a super diverse and hyper-diverse city. We, as members of this council, need to have absolute confidence that every employee of Birmingham City Council can respond excellently to every single resident in the city. And my concern remains that there is a cohort segment of the Birmingham City Council workforce, perhaps that is not yet as engaged as it should be with everyone's battle, everyone's business. And that reflects on us and our concern about how our residents may be treated when they have that experience of using the services of Birmingham City Council. I think it's something this committee should come back, ask you when the next progress stage. But I don't know if there's maybe something that the director wishes to kind of come in, or whether that anyone wants to challenge whether I have the right to ask that question.
Yeah, I think you've absolutely got the right to ask the question and get an answer to it and get updates in the future.
Yeah.
I know that one of the areas that People Services is particularly focusing on now, because it seems to be the one that's the lowest in response levels, is disability. So that's one that we're really giving some oomph to, because that's way down, isn't it? And doesn't feel right.
Thank you for that conversation areas of that will help us understand what we need to do, and it also raises awareness.
You can't, right, Chair, because part of the reason that we're undertaking all this work is because we need a workforce that reflects the incredible diversity of this city and can respond to
and I think those communities wants to be confident that whilst those that feel unable to come forward are supported to come forward, but those that are intransigent against change are also challenged in a supportive and way, but also within the wider context of what you've said. We recognise that often that remains the concern sometimes when members have engaged. The disability one is a very key point. We know that many of us have had members who have residents who experience disability who feel that their treatment by the council is not to the level that they would. I will stop there.
The comment also is not just about how our employees of the council can respond to the clients, but it's also the fact that actually as a council we need to be a shining example, don't we? And actually we need to be the ones who are pulling the rest of employers in Birmingham forward, and so we just need to be that shining example to make sure we're being inclusive workforce.
It's one of the things I've always said since we started on Everyone's Battle, Everyone's Business, is that we have to lead by example, because we cannot challenge others to step up to their role in this city to challenge the inequalities if we're not doing that ourselves. So holding a mirror up to ourselves has to be the first step in doing this.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, colleagues, and thank you for being with us for far more than we invited you for. We're very grateful for that. And thank you for navigating some of those questions as well. Very much appreciated. Colleagues, I'm aware that we do still have several standing items. I presume officers will tolerate this committee running over slightly. If there is anybody that needs to indicate they cannot no longer participate with the committee, please let Mandy know if you're online versus via the group chat, and we'll find a way of reconvening. Thank you, Councillor, and thank you, officers. And
So we'll have a 5-minute conversation.
yes, let's reconvene in 5 minutes, 5 minutes past 4. And if we do that, let's go to thank you. Close the live stream for a few minutes.
No. Sorry.
Thank you, colleagues, and thank you for allowing us that. Great. So we are going to move, change to the agenda. We're going to postpone item 9 to the next meeting of this committee, and hopefully that will enable us to get the remaining business done before in the next 25 minutes. So the next update is the external item 8, external auditors audit update 2020 to 2021, and then 2021 to 2022. John Roberts from Grant Thornton and Nicholas Coombe from Grant Thornton, welcome to you. John, over to you.
Thanks, Chair, and it's just me actually. Nicola's was unavailable. And the reason why Nicola's unavailable is that she's completing the work on the housing benefits grant claim review, and that work is complete now, and I've signed it off. We're just doing the final sort of dispatch checking arrangements and so on. So at least the committee can be assured that we've made progress there. We've also made progress on the audit of the financial statements for both outstanding years. As I previously told the committee, the matter of highways infrastructure was holding up both years. That has moved on now, in that we do have the statutory override from government that we were looking for to make it a more practical exercise than it would have been before. That's good. We've also had the SIPFA Code of Practice revision, which has taken away the requirement to disclose gross cost and gross accumulated depreciation. So again, that's good, and it's pragmatic solution that's allowed that to progress. The final piece of the jigsaw, which is still in progress but is moving on, is that SIPFA has engaged one of the UK's highways technical sort of specialist representative bodies to review typical useful economic lives of the assets, and has come up with guidance there and ranges that we should consider are reasonable for local authorities. And we're working through that with officers now. There are some differences between the council's approach and SIPFA's guidelines. We'll look at those, and either amendments might follow, or we might be able to get comfortable with officers' explanations as to why the Birmingham position is different from the SIPFA benchmarks. So that can move on. Then there was the matter that we'd picked up in 21-22 in the current year's audit, a number of adjustments that also had a bearing on the previous years, and as the previous year was unsigned, we needed to go back and work those through into the previous year's accounts as well, and progress has been made in those areas. So we've been moving forward. Yesterday, I was brought to my attention that there was potential issue that we need to bottom out regarding the subsidiary accounts, the Birmingham Children's Trust accounts, and processes that the subsidiary auditor has followed that we need to check through in terms of us getting comfortable with those. That might require some additional work, but we will prioritise that, and hopefully it won't be a big area of delay. We think it's unlikely that we will be able to get everything done and dusted for the next committee now, because the next committee is following just 2 weeks after this one. But we will certainly be able to do it, within the time scale to allow us to hit the ground for March now. That's the current position, Chair.
Thank you, John. That is appreciated. Any comments from colleagues? Thank you, John. We've no comments in the room, and we're trying to get through to the rest of the agenda quickly, so you'll forgive us if perhaps we but I do know that we do need to know that verbal update from the external auditors, so can I get that agreed, colleagues? Okay. We do appreciate your continued briefing and ensuring that members are aware of the current situation within which you are working. Thank you, John. So I'm moving on to the public sector internal audit standards, external quality assessment, and that's for you, Sarah, as Assistant Director. I understand, I don't think the colleagues from Manchester are on the line, but they may well be.
They will be reviewing.
In which case, I will let you do the report before giving my thanks to them.
Thank you. Part of the remit of this committee is to oversee the work of internal audit. And every 5 years, we have to have an external assessment, completely independent inspection to review our work against a set of criteria. The criteria is set out in the terms of reference, which starts on page 50, but includes things like independence and competence, our position within the authority, and the value that we add. It was conducted by Manchester's internal audit team, and their conclusion was that Birmingham audit conforms with the standards. The full report starts on page 39 of the pack. In paragraph 1.5, confirms that we meet the requirements of the standards and exceed some of them, which is a really strong foundation that allows for our agenda of continuous improvement, including those recommendations that they've made that start on page 47. I'm very pleased to be able to report that outcome, and I'd like to thank Manchester and all the other contributors that are listed on page 53 that's built that assessment that we've given.
Thank you, Sarah. And I would like to echo your thanks to any colleagues from Manchester and that team that were looking in for their work, which is very gratefully received. I wonder if I could ask you, Sarah, in terms of those additional recommendations made, is there a way that we could be showing the committee a regular kind of tracking of that, so that we understand your trajectory and the work you do with regard to the regular updates you give us around the work of internal audit about how those recommendations are being taken on board and delivered against. And then to really say congratulations to you and your team for having been assessed, which is often a challenging and difficult time for colleagues when those things happen. I know that. And to the fact that this clearly comes back, having done that assessment, I would say are absolutely in the right direction, and maintaining this the standard of this council means to me. So I'm very grateful to you and your team for doing that as well. So is that okay? We'll find some way of using these and utilising
Yes.
That would be wonderful. Okay, in which case, colleagues, we then move to, we agree that we've noted that.
Agreed.
Thank you, colleagues. And then I'll move on to items 11 and then 12, but starting with item 11. Now, we had agreed as a committee that the Ombudsman's reports would be summarised, and that then we would discuss any issues that members or questions members wanted to have with regard to the report, rather than asking for a separate presentation. So I'm very grateful to Darren Shea, the Director of Streetsing, for joining us today. Darren, I'm not looking for a presentation for you from this time. I've got a statement I think you've helped prepare for yourself, which I shall read out. And then is that's the kind of process we're going down. And I think, if there's anything that, the independent advisor you want to challenge us on, I think we'd be grateful for that. So if I read this out now, so the summary, this is a summary of the document we've already been sent, and this is for those online as well. This is a city operation summary of the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman's public interest report concerning complaints about assisted waste collections. The LGSCO issued a public interest report in this case. The reasons for issuing the report were non-compliance with our recommendations, recurrent fault over a prolonged period of time, and it is a significant topical issue in the local area. Complaint. The complainants are registered for assisted collections. They all complain the council had repeatedly failed to correctly return their bins to the storage point after emptying them. The LGSCO had previously investigated complaints from all three complainants. The council failed to demonstrate the action it was taking in response to the recommendations made was effective in resolving the issues identified. There remains evidence of significant systemic issues within the council's waste department. These have been ongoing for several years. All these factors helped inform the LGSCO's decision to issue this report to further highlight the problems being experienced by these three complainants and many other residents in the city. The outcome. All of the complainants have experienced further frustration and disappointment with the ongoing failure to return their bins and the council's inability to resolve the problem. The council's repeated failure to return the complainant's bin to their collection points as part of the assisted collection service is fault. This fault has caused the complainants an injustice. To remedy the injustice caused, they recommended the council apologise to each of the complainants for the ongoing failings in service, pay Mrs X £200 to recognise the frustration and difficulties the fault identified above has caused her, pay Mrs Y £200 to recognise the frustration and difficulties the fault identified above has caused her, and pay Mrs Z Two, and to recognise the frustration and difficulties the fault identified as caused her. To review its waste, that the council review its waste collection monitoring arrangements to ensure they are robust and effective in identifying and resolving any problems and in improving service levels. This review and its findings should be reported directly to the Chief Executive and Leader of the Council and should be considered by the most appropriate committee of elected members. And the Council should produce an action plan to identify ways of improving its staff performance. This should include a timeframe for any action. This action plan should be reported directly to the Chief Executive and Leader of the Council and should be considered by the most appropriate committee of elected members. That is a summary of the report. I therefore invite members to make any comments beforehand giving a response, asking for a response from the Director. Are there any issues or comments on the report that members wish to make?
I was just going to, sorry, I should raise your pizza. Just in terms of the recommendations, that actually what has been done. But I didn't know whether that was what you were asking us to for comment. Is that what Darren is now?
So Darren will now respond to whether or not he's made this. But if members have read the report and there are any area of issues they want further clarification on or any points they wanted to make.
No, I mean it's just this point about what actually has it been reviewed, and I want to know exactly what the action plan is and what steps or any timeframes or anything like that. So I don't have any comments above than that, but I probably presume that's what you're going to be answering for us.
That's great. Thanks, Chair. So what there's been a number of actions that have been taken. The main one is previously, because these are quite historical complaints. So that was when we was on a paper system, 2 paper systems where we have a round map on one piece of paper and a list of assisted collections on another piece of paper, which the crews take out when they go around. All of that has now been transferred onto an electronic system which sits in the cab, so the driver now sees when they enter the road, a list of all the assisted collections now automatically come up. So there is no messing between the 2 pieces of paper. That's been implemented. The crews have those electronic devices and have been operating those since December. And we monitor then the compliance and the check, because the driver has to confirm that they've completed the collection within that road to the specification. So we monitor that on a daily basis.
Thank you, Darren.
Just in terms of, so every vehicle has the computer monitoring system, or what's an iPad or similar to a tablet, is it?
Correct.
So every one of those is fitted.
Yes, we've got 2 different types. We've got some hire vehicles. So the hire vehicles have a temporary solution with a windscreen mounted one. Our own vehicles have all got hardwired tablets on their device, and that's for all residual and recycling. Chris.
But in terms of monitoring, though, as it stands at the moment, the only monitoring necessarily that's happening is the crew putting in information to say we've done what we're supposed to do. But that doesn't seem to me necessarily to be overall monitoring, does it? Because right, so what's the from that?
So there's 2 things. The driver is responsible for the actual performance. So the driver then ticks. That's first line. First line driver goes, yes, we've completed that. That then goes back into the tablet device. The assistant service managers that are in the depot, we have 3 per depot responsible for an area. They then take those reports and then they physically go on site to monitor against performance.
How do they physically go on site then?
They take the report in a van and go out and.
So they check every single potential assisted collection?
Not every assisted collection and not every location, but they will pick a random number and go check those numbers.
And is it because you can log your missed So if your assisted collection, either it's not been put back or it's been missed, you can log that onto your Brum account, or you can log missed collection. So how does that feedback then into this system?
Right. Okay. So if the driver hasn't picked it up, and then the resident goes, my bin's still here. That goes in through the contact centre. So they'll record that through the contact centre, and the contact centre send that information directly to the depot to review and put right.
There's also a tracker on the van as well.
Yeah, there are trackers on the vans, absolutely. But then the depends which way you go. So if the crew says it's completed, then there's a statistical monitoring from the manager. If the resident says it hasn't been collected, they log in through the Brum account, that comes to the manager, and then each one of those is assessed. So each one of those goes out, the manager will check why that hasn't been collected.
And the manager of the depot is ultimately accountable. Is that the line of accountability?
The line of accountability goes from the driver taking the first initial, the depot teams are the second level. That's reviewed at an operational meeting with the principal managers on a weekly basis, and then it gets reported to them.
I'm aware of time, Director. I'm very grateful to you coming. So a series of actions here, they're considered by the most appropriate committee of elected members. Has this come into this committee? But in terms of the engagement this committee has with the scrutiny committee in terms of the improvement, are there reports that have also been shared with the scrutiny committee?
We have a number of performance recommendations, which some of that is reported through to the deputy leaders' performance teams, and some of that is reported directly to the chief exec and the leader at a regular meeting.
I can probably help with the corp. So there is a corporate performance framework in place with 3 different levels to it. And so all of the key performance indicators go into the corporate procurement, the performance team, sorry, it's that stage of the day, and they're reported to Cabinet on a regular basis. So all of that gets highlighted there. In addition to that, because this has been an area of key interest because of wanting to make step change and improvement in performance, that also gets reported in, which is additional to our full corporate performance framework, into the leader on a weekly basis because he's concerned by the levels of performance.
So I guess the challenges that I'm possibly thinking through is that bins are an issue that matters most to members. And we've got a clear finding that though you do say time has passed and improvements happen, I've had in the last few weeks a failure to collect an assisted collection that caused distress to an individual resident. How is it that we're communicating back to members? Are we relying on the leader to do that, or are we having some kind of way that members can feel confident of that collection thing? Because there is a bit of a challenge that I've noticed. I mean, it's an interesting one. I've been learning off by heart 540,000 collections per week.
Excellent.
And I think that we've got to get to a stage where every single local council can repeat that, because there is a national view that kind of says that it's interesting that the Ombudsman has noted the topic of this issue. I used to live in Watford. Watford has, I think, presumably between 30,000 and 40,000 collections per week. It's the smallest. And a 5% failure on Watford, probably you'd have to go quite a way to go find where that problem is. 5% failure in Birmingham is a significant number of households. And I think our members being able to understand the challenge and understand the progression helps us to go back to this issue that the Ombudsman is highlighting of the topic and challenging that. So again, I go back, I'm still perhaps not hearing how we're communicating well with members, unless, of course, it is this committee's responsibility to do our own duty. But I'm not really up for doing that just yet.
Missed collections is one of the regular items that gets reported through Cabinet and then on to Homes and Neighbourhood Scrutiny. It is one of the questions that I more or less get called in every time the report is presented. We are just rolling out a series of depot visits to local elected members, where we are going to give them the full immersions of street cleansing and refuse collection, so you can see the technology firsthand, meet the crews, meet the managers, and for us to be able to impart how we carry out that work. Those are in the dates, are in the diary, and then invites will be going out to local elected members.
Councillor Khan's going to have to end in 5 minutes, so I'm going to quickly move on to this. But Director, I know you're coming to a subsequent meeting of this committee with the Cabinet member. I'd like to kind of reflect further on what we've learned from this ombudsman as part of that Cabinet assurance session, if that is possible. Moving on quickly, I just want to note that then, colleagues, that that the Audit Committee notes the Director of City Operations response to the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman's recommendations. And then finally, and I'm going to rush through the rest of the agenda, but I do need to write out item 12. The summary, this is the City Housing Ombudsman complaint. Again, the report has been given to members. The LGCSO issued a public interest report in this case. The reasons for issuing a report were recurrent fault, significant fault, injustice, or remedy, and systemic problems where there is wider learning through authority. The complaint was that Mr. X complained that he and his family have been in unsuitable temporary accommodation since 2008. He says the council has failed to move the family to suitable accommodation despite knowing since 2008 the accommodation was unsuitable and accepting the accommodation was unsuitable formally in September 2021. Mr. X has a disability which affects his mobility and the property does not meet his needs. He cannot access his home safely and with dignity. Outcome. The LGCSO found fault with the council for failing to provide Mr. X and his family with suitable temporary accommodation since July 2014, failing to review the suitability of Mr. X's accommodation despite his complaints, delaying completing suitability review in 2020, delaying issuing decisions on statutory homelessness reviews. These faults cause Mr. X injustice and may have caused injustice to others who have not complained. To remedy the injustice caused, we recommend the council apologise to Mr. X in writing, pay Mr. X £300 for each month he spent in unsuitable temporary accommodation from July 2014 until the council ended its duty in October 2022. This is 99 months and therefore a payment of £29,700. Pay, and then another recommendation to pay Mr. X a further £300 a month until the council either makes an offer of suitable alternative accommodation or otherwise ends its duty to Mr. X should the ongoing suitability review find the current offer to be unsuitable. The council will also take the following action to improve its services. To remind relevant staff that the complaint claiming temporary accommodation is unsuitable should result in a decision which sets out the attendant statutory review rights. Remind relevant staff that any extension to the deadline for responding to statutory reviews should be agreed in writing and any delay communicated quickly. I therefore, in the interest of time, I know that we have Stephen Philpott, who is the Acting Head of Service Housing Solutions and Support Service, on the team's element of this meeting. I would therefore like to ask two questions of you, Stephen. One is, how did we end up with a local government social care ombudsman complaint that indicates that we significantly let down a resident of the city since 2008 and effectively undermined their dignity throughout that time? And secondly, to give this committee assurance that all those actions recommended by the local government and social care ombudsman have been enacted or are in the process of being enacted.
Thank you. Yes, clearly this is a case that goes back a very significant time, and as the Ombudsman points out, they struggled and we struggled to be able to go back to 2008, hence they going from 2014 in terms of the case. In terms of the situation, clearly the individual and the household needs changed generally over that period of time, and so the initial assessments which were done didn't manage to keep up with the changing circumstances of the household. And then there is a long narrative that we have of seeking to find suitable accommodation for the household, but on each occasion finding that when it came down to the suitability checks, it not being suitable, and therefore the clock continuing to tick. It is clear that there have been times where the case hasn't been managed as proactively, anywhere nearly as much as it should have been through that time period, because clearly it's an inordinate amount of time that has gone by as far as the case is concerned. In terms of actions taken, yes, the actions that were required of the Ombudsman in terms of the report have been taken. There is still negotiation going on with the actual individual and their representatives in terms of quite what that means for them. There were some recommendations about how the money be paid, which we're in negotiation with them about. And we are also in negotiation with them again about the suitability of an accommodation offer that has been made to them. So the case is still going on at the moment in terms of, again, their needs and what accommodation has been made available.
Thank you, Stephen. So this case continues to be a challenge, which means that we continue to need to respond to those financial penalties set on us by the Ombudsman. We would be grateful if you could continue to update the committee via on the implementation of those recommendations. Those recommendations at the end, though, those two reminding the relevant staff, are we confident that those challenges have been echoed through to the workforce and that workforce is responding to them?
We are, in terms of those messages going to the workforce, and also this situation. We have many reviews come in about the suitability of accommodation, and so it isn't a case that this is just one point and all the staff need reminding about one case. It is something that we're providing quite a wide range of interventions on and work around, including a team working on it, including our business intelligence reporting on such cases, and to ensure that they don't get lost. So it isn't just on the back of this case that we're responding, training and talking to staff. It is a wider piece about the challenges we have, ensuring that at the moment 4,500 households in temporary accommodation are all in suitable accommodation at the same time. And just on the financial issue, the clock at the moment is frozen as far as the amount per month, and that is subject to the outcome of the process that we're involved in at the moment.
Thank you for that update. I would ask that, given the time does not really enable us to go further into this, I would ask that when the Cabinet member is next in front of this committee, the consideration be given to some of the continued implementation of those recommendations, if that is okay, if that could be checked by the committee. So I'm very grateful. Thank you, Stephen, for joining us. I'm aware that, again, of the agenda and time. I'm going to move the schedule of outstanding minutes to the next item. So we just, on item 12, the Audit Committee notes the Director of City Housing's response to the local government and social care ombudsman's recommendations. Can I get that? Great.
Great.
Thank you, colleagues. So I'm going to move the schedule of outstanding minutes because we are actually back here in this room in 2 weeks' time, you'll be glad to know, colleagues. So we will take that there. And give colleagues a bit more time to get those things done. I'm going to move on to any other urgent business, in which case I then move, because I know that Councillor Carr needs to go. I want to keep the meeting quiet. I have an information point, but it's not the chorus of the issue, I don't think. So, this is an update. Not yet. Okay. Authority to chair and officers that to move in an urgent situation between meetings, the chair jointly in the relevant and with the relevant chief officer has authority to act on behalf of the committee. Is this agreed?
Agreed.
You can now. Just date of next meeting. The next meeting is scheduled to take place on Tuesday, the 14th of February at 2 o'clock in Committee Room 6. The council, and then I did have an item of information purposes business, both Councillor Conwell is on his way out and Councillor Perks, is that we will be discussing the annual report of this committee to the full council at the full council meeting next week, and I'll be grateful if both of you will contribute to the debate if you feel able. Thank you, colleagues. This meeting is closed. Thank you, everyone, for